Remembrance Sunday 2020 was yesterday, November the 8th. We celebrate on the nearest Sunday to November the 11th at 11 o'clock, the anniversary of the end of World War I, when the Armistice Peace Agreement was signed. That war now seems like a very long time ago, especially when there have been plenty of wars since then. But World War I changed modern warfare. For some people, it defined the horror that would come out of the 20th century. Millions of men fought in the battles from all across the world. For the first time, the role of British women changed in war. In the UK, young women worked in factories and on farms. Others travelled to battlefields to be nurses and ambulance drivers. Once the war was over, many felt that the sacrifice of all those people should not be forgotten. In 1919, on the first anniversary of the armistice, a service was held. Now, every year, on the Sunday nearest to 11th of November, at 11 o'clock in the morning, a remembrance service is held at the Cenotaph in London. The service now commemorates British and Commonwealth servicemen and women who died in the two world wars and in later conflicts. Her Majesty the Queen, religious leaders, politicians, representatives of state and the armed and auxiliary forces gather to pay respect to those who gave their lives defending others. The Cenotaph is not the only memorial. All over the country there are memorials to those who fought, and last weekend they were covered in wreaths of poppies. In 1919, King George issued a letter proposing 2 minutes silence on November the 11th. The first minute would be used to remember the fallen, and the second to remember the surviving families of the dead. King George's letter went out to all governments in the British Empire on November the 6th, 1919, and it was published in most national newspapers the following morning. In Canada, George Foster, the acting Prime Minister, read the letter in the House of Commons. I believe that my people in every part of the Empire fervently wish to perpetuate the memory of that great deliverance and of those who laid down their lives to achieve it, the King wrote. He then proposed 2 minutes of silence to be held on November the 11th, so that in perfect stillness the thoughts of everyone may be concentrated on reverent remembrance of the glorious dead. King George added that no elaborate organisation seemed necessary to accomplish this moment of silence. At a given signal, which can easily be arranged to suit the circumstances of each locality, I believe that we shall all gladly interrupt our business and pleasure, whatever it may be, and unite in this simple service of stillness and remembrance. King George's letter was accompanied by further instructions from the Secretary of State for the Colonies, outlining how to implement the moment of silence. He said, "Trains will be stopped on the railways, traffic on the streets, ships as far as possible at sea, and every effort will be made to get work suspended everywhere, in schools, shops, mines, and factories, to ensure complete silence," the message said. The first 2 minutes silence in London was reported in the Manchester Guardian on the 12th of November 1919. It said, "The first stroke of 11 produced a magical effect. The tramcars glided into stillness, motors ceased to cough and fume, and stopped dead, and the mighty-limbed dray horses hunched back upon their loads and stopped also, seeming to do it of their own volition. Someone took off his hat, and with a nervous hesitancy the rest of the men bowed their heads also. Here and there an old soldier could be detected slipping unconsciously into the posture of attention. An elderly woman not far away wiped her eyes, and the man beside her looked white and stern. Everyone stood very still. The hush deepened. It had spread across the whole city and become so pronounced as to impress one with a sense of audibility. It was a silence which was almost pain, and the spirit of memory brooded over all of it. You will see lots of people wearing poppies at this time of year, and many of you will be wearing them yourselves. But why do we wear poppies? On Sunday, the 2nd of May 1915, Lieutenant Alexis Helmer of the 2nd Battery, 1st Brigade Canadian Field Artillery, was killed by a direct hit from an 8-inch German shell. He was a great friend of John McCrae, who was a doctor and a poet. His body parts were gathered in sandbags and laid in an army blanket. He was buried the same evening at the new burial ground created for the French and Canadian casualties at Essex Farm British Military Cemetery. Because there was no chaplain, his friend, Major John McCrae, conducted a simple service. He recited from memory passages from the Church of England's Order of Burial of the Dead. Major John McCrae wrote the first draft of a poem commemorating the war dead on the same evening as his friend Helmer's death. Some fellow soldiers said that he was seen writing the poem sitting on the rear step of an ambulance while looking at his friend's grave. Bright red poppies were said to be springing up amongst the graves in the cemetery. The poem that he wrote was called In Flanders Fields. It was published on December the 8th, 1915. In Flanders fields the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place. And in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. While poppies remain more popular in the UK and other Commonwealth countries, it was an American, Moyna Michael, who can be credited with the first charitable poppy sale. She'd been working in New York and was so stirred by McCrae's poem that she vowed to always wear a poppy on her lapel. And she purchased 25 silk poppies and gave them to her colleagues. She continued her effort to have the poppy adopted as a symbol of national remembrance, and it was just 2 years later when the National American Legion adopted the poppy as the official symbol of remembrance. So it does appear that the early history of the poppy is deeply rooted in American tradition and is not of European origin. The popularity of the poppy grew exponentially and crossed the Atlantic, and the French started making the paper poppies on an industrial scale, and then in 1921 sent a delegation of sellers into London. And it didn't take long then for the British to adopt the poppy as a national symbol of remembrance as well. A veteran commander of British forces, Field Marshal Douglas Haig, was enthused by the idea, and he put forward the idea, and the British Legion adopted it almost immediately. And the first ever annual Poppy Day in the UK occurred on November the 11th, 1921, marking the 3rd anniversary of Armistice Day. The poppy outgrew the North American roots rapidly. It's been adopted by Canada and Australia in 1921 and New Zealand in 1922. At this time, though, the poppies intended for distribution in the UK were still being made in France by French war widows. 1922 saw the opening of a factory in Bermondsey, which employed just 5 disabled ex-military personnel to produce poppies all year round for distribution in the weeks prior to Remembrance Sunday. The very first official poppy appeal of 1921 raised £106,000. Today, the Royal British Legion aims to make £25 million annually from the sale of poppies, and its factory, now located in Richmond in Surrey, employs 50 ex-servicemen all year round in preparation for the annual fundraising campaign. Importantly, the adoption of the poppy as a symbol of charity has seen the poppy transcend its purely metaphorical and commemorative status and has instead become a physical, palpable object, providing financial stability for those affected by war. So when you buy a poppy, know that you are helping families affected by war and conflict. And when you wear a poppy, you are publicly acknowledging your respect and remembrance of those fallen. They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
we will remember them.